I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Senator James Lankford asked questions about border security in Central America during a Senate Homeland Security Committee hearing on Thursday. He claimed it is more difficult for the U.S. to have border security if those southern countries do not have strong border policies. Lankford probed State Department official Emily Mandrala on what leverage her department is using to ensure Central American countries are not allowing migrants to continue north. Let's listen in for her response.
Thanks to all of you and being here. I've got a bunch of questions, and so if I could ask everyone to be brief in your responses on it, let me try to go through several things on this. Let me start with the Deputy Assistant Secretary Mandrala. There are ads that are up on radio ads and such encouraging folks not to do migration in the United States. Does the State Department actually run those, yes or no?
Encouraging individuals not to migrate to the United States?
Yes.
The State Department does have robust messaging efforts throughout the region. It depends on where you're talking about, but some of them, yes.
Yeah, Northern Triangle, as far as Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador on those. Could we get the budget for those and also the copy, the text for those on it? That would be very helpful for us to be able to see what's actually being used.
I'd be happy to follow up.
Thank you. I talked to Secretary Mayorkas recently, and we were talking about his 6-point plan that he's put out, which I have some significant questions on. There's a section of it in the 6-point plan that says they're going to work with countries in Central America on trying for them to be able to enforce their borders as well and also have asylum seekers there. I asked him the question of what leverage are you using on those countries to encourage them to actually enforce their borders? His response to me was State Department actually is in charge of that. So let me ask State Department, what leverage are you using to encourage countries in Central America for them to enforce their borders? What are you doing there for them to stop irregular migration that's just passing through their country and heading north?
We have strong partnerships with countries in Central America, and many of them are enforcing their borders for their own reasons and through their own to protect their own national interests. During COVID-19, the height of the pandemic, many of the countries imposed public health requirements, additional document checks and additional public health requirements that prevented transit through their borders for public health reasons, for example. We are supporting, through our foreign assistance, training of border personnel, for example, to train them on more effective and more humane enforcement tactics. But I would say that most of the countries in the region are conducting those enforcement actions out of their own national self-interest.
So there's no increased engagement with them to be able to put leverage on them? Because obviously we had 2 million people encountered, quote unquote, coming across our border last year, many of those from literally all over the world, many of them coming through Central America. So is there an additional effort that's coming to be able to slow down that quantity? The 6-point plan implies there's something new.
Oh, absolutely. We are engaging with them on a regular basis out of Washington, trips down to the region through our embassies on a range of priorities, including border enforcement, including accepting back repatriations of their nationals who have no legal basis to remain in the United States, and also to identify emerging trends and identify needs associated with those emerging trends.
But that's not additional border enforcement. That is repatriation. That's others. I'm asking specifically what's in the plan, what State Department is doing to put leverage on countries to enforce their own borders. You talked about training that you've done in the past, things that they did during COVID years ago. We still had 2 million people last year, many of those crossing through those borders. What are we doing now to encourage those countries to enforce their borders?
Well, for example, when we notice a trend working with interagency partners of a certain nationality that's arriving in larger numbers at our border, we will carry that information, including the routes that those individuals are transiting, to countries throughout the region and look for areas of partnership. If they're arriving by air, countries may decide through their own sovereign decision-making process to impose visas on those nationalities that are arriving by air that can and that have been proven to be conduits to large flows of irregular migration, to impose visas on those nationalities to make sure that those that are arriving by air are not intending migrants to the United States. And we also know that if one country imposes a visa requirement, it's very easy for those routes to be diverted elsewhere. So we make sure that we are alerting and working in partnership with countries throughout the region so that that route is not diverted.
Great. Could you get us that plan, that idea? Because again, I go back Secretary, that's helpful, by the way, on the visa piece and people flying in, but people that are walking across borders, and we're seeing that border to border to border to border at times. We've all talked about this for years. If they don't enforce their borders, it's much harder to enforce ours. What I'm trying to get to is what is State Department doing to provide leverage to countries to say, stop, actually enforce your border. It's different than training. It's different than visas and all that. And if we can just get that in writing, that'd be very helpful to me. And we'll follow up with that. Assistant Secretary Nunez-Neto, it's good to see you again. When you and I visited in February, I believe, when you were in my office, we had talked back and forth about the guidance that you've provided to Border Patrol agents, USCIS asylum officers to evaluate claimed vulnerabilities during the screenings to determine whether a migrant should be placed in MPP. I asked for that. You said, no problem. Just as a heads up, it's May. I don't have that yet. And so if I could get that, my office will follow up with you on that request again. But that'd be very helpful to be able to get that. We're trying to be able to figure out the usefulness of MPP and the way that screening is actually done. And the officers, when I was there in February, getting a chance in January to be able to visit with the officers on the ground, they were fuzzy about it. I came back to ask what's being handed, and you said, yes, there is guidance. I just haven't seen it yet. So can I get that?
We will certainly follow up with your office on that, sir, and happy to provide a briefing and the documents we were able to.
The documents would be great to be able to get on that. So you had just mentioned earlier to Senator Portman in your conversation that we don't have enough bed space. It's interesting to me in the budget proposal that DHS has put out, they actually request 5,000 fewer beds for single adults and 2,500 fewer beds for family units. Your testimony is we don't have enough beds. The budget request is we need even fewer. And I'm trying to figure out still, when there's the ongoing discussion about May the 23rd, that on May the 23rd, the plan is to end Title 42 at the border because there's no COVID at the border, but we still have restrictions on our detention facilities that we can't use every bed because there's still COVID in the detention facilities, but not COVID at the border. So Title 42 is going away at the border, but we can't hold them. We've got to just wave them through to be able to come through and can't do detention. It's a double hit here. You're still limiting the number of people that can be held in detention, and you're asking for fewer beds while you're saying we need more bed space. I'm just trying to figure this out.
So to be clear, Senator Portman asked whether we had the ability to detain everybody we encountered, and my response was that the department has actually never had enough beds to do that. You know, we are focused right now on reviewing every step of the expedited removal process to try to compress the timeline. It takes historically 6 to 8 weeks to remove people in expedited removal who, you know, either are found not to have a fear or who appeal that decision and have the no fear finding upheld by an immigration judge. That's just too long, frankly, and it's been the historical average. So we are really working to maximize the beds we have by getting people through the process much faster. But, you know, one of the challenges we have, frankly, is that a quarter of our encounters right now are from countries we really can't remove people to, and we just do not have good options for, you know, individuals from Venezuela, from Cuba, and from Nicaragua, where we just don't have the agreements in place with those governments to remove people, even if an immigration judge does find that they are not, you know, they don't merit asylum.
Senator Lankford, I'm going to have to ask you to hold it at that point. And, well, but there'll be a second round, I understand, and you may want to take advantage of that. All right, Senator.